If you live in London, you will know that the London Overground has went through a naming overhaul. Um, and this is basically some lines have been named after certain social movements and issues, and it's attracted a fair share of controversy. Has to be said, particularly from Conservatives. Sadiq Khan is a Labour mayor, and he's often been accused of being very partisan. And I'm just looking at this piece on the in the Daily Mail, and their headline is "Next Stop Woke Central," as Cam forks out 6 million on rail rebranding. So I followed this in a few other sources as well. I don't live in London, obviously, but I've mixed feelings on it. I'm not entirely against some of the names being used because they do represent important aspects of London's social history, and I don't really see anything wrong with that. Um, I haven't really used the London Overground. I've used the London Underground pretty much every time I've been in the capital, but I'm not that familiar with the Overground, so I don't know how easy it is to navigate. Because one of the arguments for this is it makes it easier to know the lines. So basically, I'll just quickly go through what the lines are and why they are described as such, as in why they were chosen. The Lioness line, honouring the legacy and achievements of the England women's football team, which continues to inspire the next generation of women and girls in sport. I assume these are from Transport for London, these descriptions. That's kind of a gold line. The Windrush line, recognising the contribution of the Windrush generation who continue to shape and enrich London's cultural and social identity today. I should say that's from Highbury and Islington to West Croydon. The first one's from Watford Junction to Euston. That's red, the Windrush line. Green, this is probably the most controversial, the Suffragette line, celebrating this movement with its London links that fought for votes for women and paved the way for women's rights. That's from Gospel Oak to Barking Riverside. I'll come back to that because it's probably the most controversial. Mildmay line, honouring the work of the Mildmay NHS hospital during the HIV/AIDS crisis that made it a valued and respected place for the LGBTQ plus community today. That's from Richmond to Stratford, and it's blue. I should say the Suffragette line is green. The Weaver line, it's I guess kind of violet coloured, celebrating an area of London known for its textile trade, which has been shaped over the centuries by a diverse group of migrant communities and individuals. That's from Liverpool Street to Enfield Town. And finally, the Liberty line, which is a kind of grey slate colour, celebrating the long-standing freedom that is a defining feature of London and the historical independence of the people of Havering. That's from Rumford to Upminster. Incidentally, that may refer to the liberty of Havering as opposed to liberty in the Enlightenment sense, i.e., liberty being a medieval division. Um, okay, I just want to talk a little bit primarily about the suffragette line because it's probably the most controversial. Apparently, it depicts a statue of, well, it does, I can see it right here. Just show you. It's a bit hard to see in the video, but basically, it shows a statue of Millicent Fawcett. Now, this is significant because Millicent Fawcett was a suffragist, not a suffragette. I'm going to be making a video soon on the very important difference between the two groups. They're often conflated, but there is a big difference. And I think for the last 100 years, people have kind of assumed that it's a suffragette movement that got women to vote. This really needs to be revisited. But regardless, the suffragettes were the more militant, violent movement. In 2 years, from 1912 to 1914, they engaged in an arson and bombing campaign. It killed 4 people and wounded at least 24. I mean, they were terrorists by their own admission. So, in a city that's experienced no shortage of terrorism, that seems to be a thoughtless choice, I would say. I've no problem with it being named after the women's suffrage movement, but call it the suffragist line. They call it the suffragette line. You know, in 50 years from now, are we going to have the Just Stop Oil line? Um, the Hizbut Tahrir line? It's, I think that's contentious, and I do have a problem with it. I think this is lazy history because it's assuming that the suffragettes got women the vote. But anyway, go read out a little bit of commentary by Brendan O'Neill. Now, granted, this is a right wing source, and so naturally they're going to be attacking Sadiq Khan. Incidentally, his mayoral rival, Tory mayoral rival Susan Hall, said she was surprised he didn't call one the Sadiq line. And I'll just read out a little bit here. The only surprise from the announcement is that he hasn't named one of them the Sadiq line. Paul Scully, a former Minister of London, said Londoners just want a mayor who can get them from A to B on time, at reasonable cost and in a degree of comfort, not just spraying the word cloud of virtue signalling at a cost of 6 million of taxpayers' money. He's just putting a new lick of paint over a creaking transport system rather than doing the job Londoners expect. Um, it's also been pointed out that Susan Hall says that 1,000 Londoners have been killed on Khan's watch. That is 1,000 Londoners murdered. Um, and the number of violent assaults on tube staff has increased. From April and September 2022, there were 431 incidents of violence, and in the same period in 2023, that increased to 647. In other words, is this really a priority? You know, this paint job. They are clearly biased to the left. I mean, there's 6 lines. Why not give 3 of them more, right pitching names or conservative pitching names? Why not a Churchill line? Um, for the wartime prime minister. Why not something honouring the armed forces, honouring Londoners who died in 2 world wars, something like that. Um, it does seem to be a pitch to left-wing social movements primarily. Now, I'm not against them. I think these are important aspects of history, particularly the Windrush line. I'm all for that. The Weaver line, the Mildmay line, I'm okay with it in principle, but I do think the Suffragette line should be the Suffragist line. And I do think this is, Khan playing up the culture wars without question. Um, if I could just read a little bit out of what Brendan O'Neill says, he's associated with GB News, I believe. Let's see. I don't want to read out the whole thing because of video space, but there was a few bits that caught my attention. I've already spoken about the controversy around the suffragette line, which really glorifies terrorism. Um, see, there's a few. I'm just trying to pick out a few bits here rather than reading out the whole thing. I'm so amazed there isn't a non-binary line, a rejoin the EU line, or perhaps a free Palestine line. TfL claims the new names reflect London's diverse history. They do the opposite. They mostly pay tribute to minorities and then in the process leave out the mainstream of London life. I don't really agree with that. I think some of them are important. I mean, the Windrush line, of course, Windrush is an important aspect of London's history. So I think Brendan O'Neill's kind of doing the opposite. He's being a bit short-sighted in that regard. But he's right to say that it's biased to the left, just as he's biased to the right. Um, let's see here. There was a few other bits that caught my attention. Oh well, yeah. I think Sadiq Khan's been a very polarizing mayor, but then again, so was Ken Livingstone and Boris Johnson. Um, the mayor of London's the most powerful elected individual in the country, or in the sense that he has the largest personal mandate, whereas the prime minister is the leader of the party that wins the general election. So mayor of London's a powerful position. It's a prominent position, and I think Sadiq Khan has had a pretty contentious mayoralty. Crime has risen on his watch. The culture wars have got worse. I wouldn't blame everything on Sadiq Khan. I think, for example, the fall in trust of the Metropolitan Police, a lot of that comes down to the Met themselves. So I don't think it's fair to blame everything on Khan. But he has been, this is the bit I want to quote. I think O'Neill calls him a foot. No, let me get this right. He's the Brigadier General in the Culture Wars, I think is can't find the thing now. But anyway, let's just say Brendan O'Neill doesn't think highly of Sadiq Khan. But I do think it's true that Sadiq Khan has pushed the culture wars in a very, very divisive way. Now, when you have a mayor of London, whether he or she is Labour or Tory, they're going to be partisan. That's inevitable. But when you are leading a city of over 8 million people, more like 9 million now, you know, you need to be as unifying as possible. And I think Khan has not been a unifying mayor. I think he's been a very polarizing mayor. And this is, I'm not against it in principle. I'm not against honouring social history, but it should be a bit more balanced. And as for the suffragette line, like I say, I don't mean to beat the drum too much on this, but it's important. Why not the suffragist line? Why honour a violent movement as the suffragettes were that planted bombs, killed innocent people? I think it's contentious. Anyway, let me know your thoughts, particularly if you live in London. I'll just read the last paragraph here. Emperor Khan is more comfortable dispensing ideology than fixing his city's escalating problems, from knife crime to antisocial behaviour, high street decline, transport delays, and the rest. This mini Nero must go and take his silly stunts with him. It's also a point out that there's an irony about naming one the Liberty Line, but Sadiq Khan has been very much about nanny statism. It's not state, but he's very much been about controlling people's lives in many ways. From advertisements on the London Underground to living choices like what people eat and so on. I think it's a bit ironic to call one line the Liberty Line. Many would say that Sadiq Khan, like many politicians on the left, is very much about controlling individuals. I do think a lot of his stunts have been quite patronising. I'm not even a Londoner, but I'm not against it in principle. I'm not against naming lines after social movements. Just balance it out a bit. That's all. If you're a Londoner, let me know your thoughts on this. Maybe people are for it, but I do think it's quite biased. And yeah, let me know your thoughts.